All right, I'm with Brad Peters, CEO of Pacific Empire, PEMC on the TSX Venture. And we are at site today with Brad. The drilling is just getting going. So, Brad, how are you today?
I'm well, thanks, Robert. Doing well. And I must admit it's a little chilly up here. It's about 10 below, but the treat is that there's no bugs and the roads are rock hard. So it's going great so far. The drill's here now. We're setting up and expect to be drilling within the next few hours.
Okay, I like this. I've done so many CEO interviews. I've never done one where the drill had just arrived at site and the coring was just about to get started. So that's kind of cool. And it also leads into my next question. So obviously, in this area of BC, very well-known porphyry corridor there. Yep. You got a lot of mines nearby. Usually people drill in August and September, but I could see some advantages to October. Like you said, no bugs, right?
There's a few. There are challenges. There's no doubt. And it took a long time for us firstly to get our permit here. This is I had permitted for multiple water crossings, not fish bearing, but having in place culverts and a few things. So the preparation work did take a while, and we probably ideally would have wanted to drill a little earlier. But we're in an area that, for the most part, I think you can't drill all year long. Obviously, it gets a little tricky on this property, but you can drill most of the year on our Trident property, and then our Pinnacle property, which is immediately adjacent to us to the west. We've got a much larger land position here, but the Pinnacle property to the west, it's flat as a pancake, and it's, for all intents and purposes, a swamp, and that is ideal for winter drilling. In fact, when they log that particular area over to the west of us, they winter log it. All the work over there is done in the winter, just because the roads are rock hard, and all that mud turns to basically concrete and just makes life easy, right? So I think if you're organized, you can do it. Do you want to do it when there's 10 feet of snow? Probably not. But right now there's like half an inch of snow and it's 10 below. So our only real challenge is just making sure the water in camp that we use for camp facilities is warm. And we overcome that really simply by putting all of our water into a tent and turning that tent into a tropical oasis, and then problem solved. So that's the big one. But it is a treat, I will say, having been up here in May and June, done a lot of work on the property in May and June, reconnaissance work, that in 35 years, this is one of the worst years for bugs ever. And it's a real treat. There's not one bug flying around here right now, and I can't tell you what a treat that is. So
yeah, I can only imagine the spring melt in May there is pretty nasty as far as bugs go. But okay, so here we are now. The drill's about to start turning, and you are where on the property right now?
On our Trident property, I would say we're in the central portion of the property. Historically, they've drilled an area, the discovery area, which is where our first hole is. That was the discovery in 1969. We're going to be drilling starting in that area, but instead of drilling from north to south, we're turning the drills 180 and we're going south to north. There's a few reasons, but we've identified porphyry dikes that are coming from the north, suggesting that the source of the porphyry dikes we're seeing is to the north. But they've drilled the east, they've drilled the west, and they've drilled the south, with just around 80 holes historically in 50 years. So we're really left with a pocket. Now, we know there's a porphyry here because we've seen it in drill core. We just don't know where the bulk of it is, where the central core is. But it would appear to be in the central portion of the property, which has historically been a challenge due to having to cross a creek. And that's basically what I permitted, was creek crossings. And
okay, so you're on the north side of that right now then?
Yeah, everything we're doing will be on the north side, except for the first hole. It's just to the south of it, but we're drilling to the north. Then we're just going to progress to the north, moving towards what we believe to be the central target area, but working at the same time, starting from a known, working from a known. not just stepping into the middle of nowhere and drilling. Working from a known, we'll get a lot of information on how many porphyry phases there are, vein orientations, all that. And then on the first hole, then we can just use that information as we build and move forward towards the north.
Okay, so let's take a step back, Brad, and talk a little bit about how you came to be involved with Trident, with this area of BC, and why it's so interesting to you from a porphyry exploration perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question. How did I, in short, why did I pick this area? And that's probably the central question is, why did I pick this area? And the area that I picked wasn't necessarily Trident back in, probably would have been 2010 when I was doing the work on regional generative targeting in British Columbia. And essentially what I was doing, I divided the province into blocks, and the blocks were big. And the idea was, where is there a block where there's most likely a mine, where the highest probability of finding a mine is? And that block I identified was somewhere between Mount Milligan to the east and Quaneka to the northwest. Quaneka's a nice deposit, Milligan's a mine, but that's over 100 and some odd kilometers between the two of them. And I felt that in a porphyry belt, at this particular location, there was at least a good chance that there should be something here, just based on the natural distribution of phenomenon and probabilities and how you look at the distribution of mines and belts and that sort of thing. So I said, okay, this particular area is of interest to me. Let's keep looking. And upon looking at it, I think I identified what appeared to, well, I did not identify it. Joanne Nelson, who was the regional geologist, wrote papers in 1991 and 94, where she identified a feature that she called the elbow, which is essentially where the belt comes down. You've got Quaneka up here, then there's a break. There's literally an elbow or a flexure at the location we're at. And the top of that elbow is Quaneka and the bottom is Milligan. But we're right on an area that I think appears to be a large regional flexure where you've got a northeast trending feature that looks to be hidden, but there's evidence that it's here due to the gold and a number of things. But I think we're at basically a spot here where on a large regional scale, we have a large X marks the spot and a large northeast trending feature that may come through here. That's what really got me interested and led me to start the company in 2012, base the entire company around this land position we have now. But at the time, we were a prospect generator. We brought in Oz Minerals, put this land position together. Oz explored into 2015, gave it back to us. We had to give it back to the owner because the price was very high for this property. But I kept in touch with the owners. And I let them know over the course of 8 years that I liked the property. There was unfinished business here. And we did our prospect generator thing up until about 2022, at which point I was able to purchase the property outright off the owner. I kept in touch. They called me up and said, Brad, we're in a bit of a pickle. Our ground that we've had for 50 years is going to expire. What do we do? So we came to an arrangement where they would transfer all of the mineral titles to me, 100%, no cash, no shares, nothing. But in return, I would give them a 2% royalty on the property. So they'd maintain their royalty on their baby, as they called it, because they'd had this for 50 years in addition to other properties. But this was their baby. So we came to that arrangement in 2022, transferred their property to Pacific Empire. And at that point, I made the decision within the company, no more prospect generator. We've got our land position that we started the company on that got Rick Rule, David Elliott, Andrew Williams, everybody excited. Now, instead of having the Pinnacle in good standing for 6 to 8 months and the Trident in good standing as long as we kept up our option payments, now we own the whole belt. And that's the position I wanted to be in. And once we had that, I decided the company is going to get focused, and we are going to focus on this belt based on what I felt was we were in a good spot due to the large scale regional criteria of having a very significant plumbing system in the area. And I think that's evidenced by the gold in the Clawley River that we see, placer gold. There's a tremendous amount of gold there, tremendous amount of gold on our Pinnacle property. And we're seeing very, very high gold grades on Trident when we get into the porphyry dikes. So we're seeing evidence that supports us being at a good location. And I think at this point, I think we're in the right spot. We just now need to execute on drilling and make sure that we deliver and do it in an efficient manner that gets us the information we need to make to deliver drill holes to our shareholders that get them excited.
So before we talk about the current phase of drilling that's now underway at Trident, slide 9 in the presentation shows the highlights from the historical drilling there. And what strikes me is about this, well, obviously, look, in the 70s, we didn't drill as deep back in the 70s. That was obviously just due to technology, and it was very hard to drill 600-meter holes in the 70s. But I mean, even the program in 2007, why is the drilling so shallow here if this is a porphyry project?
Great question. You're right. Firstly, the discovery was made in 1969 by Colin Campbell, and he was successful in bringing in Falconbridge in the early 70s. And the effort they put into just getting here was extraordinary, much less diamond drilling it. But at that time in the early 70s, the whole porphyry concept was relatively new. And very new concept, and not as anywhere near as well understood as it is today. But what Falconbridge was looking for was a near surface high grade copper mine, because that's what worked economically at the time. It had to be high grade, had to be near surface, and based on that, they interpreted what they were seeing to be a shear zone. So you had rocks moving, sliding past each other, and where they slid, they sheared, and that's where the copper and gold is concentrated. And as often happens in this business, the companies that came in the 90s, which was Asarco and Kookaburra, they looked at the Falconbridge work and they just assumed it's a shear zone. So they basically tried to extend that mineralization to the east. That didn't work. They got into heavily altered stuff. Heavily altered with pyrite, chlorite, clays. Okay, that didn't work in the 90s. And then in 2007, Solomon Resources came in, and that was Ron Netlitsky's company there. He's in the Mining Hall of Fame. And they sort of looked at it from the perspective of a porphyry, but approached it as if it was a shear zone again by drilling the A zone east and west, trying to extend this zone to the east and west, but they're really dikes coming off of a porphyry to the north, so it's not going to go east and west. In fact, it's coming from the north. We know that because in 2014, we had a number of majors visit the property, and one of them very clearly pointed out to us that the mineralization that we're seeing on the property in the drill core from 2007, and very specifically from holes 1, 2, and 3, it's clear as day that the mineralization is directly associated with a hornblende monzonite, a hornblende feldspar monzonite porphyry, give or take something in that range, but directly associated with the porphyry. And you can see that it's not a huge dikes; they're smaller dikes, but associated with those are very well mineralized quartz sulfide veins, sheeted veins, high vein densities. And you can see the relationship in hindsight, you can see the relationship in timing between the porphyry and the veins themselves, which really helps. And but it was very clear to us at that time in 2014 that no, this is not a shear zone. This is directly related to porphyry, and we have direct evidence of that in the core boxes from 2007. And that caused a complete shift in how I looked at the property. And that was the impetus for me to keep in touch with the owner of the property, knowing that we could not afford it back in 2015. The option payment, had to give it back. That was a tough thing to do, but that was the impetus for me to just keep looking at this property. Now I understood that it was driven by a porphyry, that we were seeing porphyry. We just didn't see the main body of it yet. Where was that? And then looking at it from that perspective over the course of 7 years, when 2022 came and I had the opportunity to buy it, I did not hesitate in the slightest. These properties are hard to come by.
Yeah, it's a big target with the right address.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah. So the revelation that I seem to understand is that you decided about 10 years ago that, hold on, all the higher grade areas that have copper and gold are associated with porphyry dikes,
Exactly.
and we need to understand where these porphyry dikes are coming from and
Exactly.
how they're correlated.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Where are these dikes coming from? That's the straight up. That's the core question. Where are they coming from? I know they're not coming from the east because it's been drilled. No, they're not coming from the south because that's been drilled. And plus, the soil geochemistry anomaly is to the north. They're not coming from the west because that's been drilled and it's epithermal. So it becomes a pretty straightforward process of elimination. What's to the north? And when I started looking at what was to the north, I started, looking at it and saying, well, look, this is the source of all the geochemistry on the property. It actually starts to the north of this annoying creek that's basically kept everybody out of this area. Maybe it's not annoying. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. I think
it is.
It's
It
kept
is a blessing.
everybody out. But the geophysics suggests that. The geology suggests that. The drilling suggests that. All evidence really points to the north. So that's and that's where we're going to explore. Once you start stacking layers that support each other, and you got to be careful with bias too. That's an easy one in this business to fall into the trap of convincing yourself it's a target. But I've tried, I had 10 years and 22 other properties in total, and I had no problem killing a property. Ask my other vice presidents about that. But this was one of them. You try and kill it, and it just kept coming back stronger. So it became a very difficult project to kill for me, and that was the reason that in 2022 I aggressively, went at the owners and said, let's get something done here, and let's not let this sort of go to the wolves and have it open for staking and then just, become useless for the next 20 years, while somebody else tries to put Humpty Dumpty back together.
Okay, so let's talk about the MT anomaly, because obviously this is now a very powerful tool in porphyry exploration, but it's very nuanced, and MT can be a little tricky to interpret, I know, and sometimes there's some false positives, and
Oh yeah,
it's geophysics, right? It's not a perfect science, but it's very interesting. You have a resistivity high, a very prominent one with like the porphyry zonation, that donut, or it looks like an oval zonation in the area to the north, I guess northwest of the creek where it's been drilled before. So what is lining up there, and what are you seeing at surface? And then what's the interpretation of why the resistive high is the target, not a resistive low, which we often see with porphyries?
it's true. What makes us think a resistivity high is the deposit. And you're right about geophysics, false positives. I mean, that's 99% of it, but they still have to be tested. But you have to layer your data. The nature of the resistivity anomaly appears to be a pipe-like feature that extends to depth. That's a positive sign. You can also get resistivity features that sort of form like a plate, or a very shallow bowl that don't extend to depth. That suggests alteration or a surface feature or some sort of lithologic or geologic feature in the rocks, but the fact that it extends to depth is positive. And that's very similar to Milligan. Mount Milligan is a resistivity anomaly, a pipe-like feature that extends to depth. And the interpretation there is, why is it resistive? Could be the nature of porphyry intrusion associated with silica and potassium feldspar alteration, potassic alteration. That could cause a resistivity anomaly as well. It was funny. It was Bob Dickinson. I remember. That's so many little things I've taken from that guy in terms of tidbits of knowledge. But I think it was Bob that told me that not all geophysical anomalies are mines, but all mines are some type of geophysical anomaly. So you have to structure your exploration program in a way that allows you to test them efficiently, smartly, but test them, because you just don't really know until you put a drill in them. There's so many reasons why you may get that signature. Now, in the area where we have the resistivity anomaly, and if it's here, what's interesting about that is that's the source of our geochem to the south as well. All the geochemistry emanates from that area. And then around that resistivity anomaly, we have a larger chargeability anomaly that seems to encompass it. So starting to, again, like I said, these layers of data that start to accumulate, you know, again, with the caveat of being very careful with cognitive bias or just, you know, just telling yourself what you want to hear. Like, you know what I mean? Making yourself believe it's a target because you want to. You have to be so careful of that. But I think that we're seeing the layers of evidence here that support that there's something interesting going on in that particular area, with some type of intrusion, some type of activity that's resulted in a pipe-like resistivity anomaly. It could be a cyanite body, could be, you don't know what it is until you put a drill in it, but it's anomalous, and it's in the area and surrounded by anomalous chargeability, which is important, and it seems to be the source of the geochemistry, and it also seems to be based on the diamond drilling. If the dikes are dipping to the north, then they should be the source of the porphyry mineralization should be in the area of that resistivity anomaly. So with that, of course, no guarantees, but based on that evidence, that's how we're going to approach this property.
So you've mapped the dikes that you're finding in the south, and they're coming from the north?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitive, because we know that, because 1, 2, 3 holes, like 1 and 2 from 2007, hole 1, hole 2, then they backed up and fired 3, and what they got, there we go, nice and aligned. They were drilling across this, thinking it was a shear zone doing this, but it's not. Their porphyry dikes doing this. They're going straight down here. So what we're going to do is turn around and chase these dikes. And we know they're dipping to the north because we had 3 clear holes from 2007 that were crystal clear, modern data. We're able to look at it and just definitively say, yes, the trend of mineralization that we're seeing, these veins and dikes are dipping to the north. And very similar to how the approach was done, apparently, from what I've read in my research, with Sol Gold's Cascabel deposit down in Ecuador. There's I think a picture on their website of one of their geos there, Steve, there looking at an outcrop, small outcrop, but they basically drilled down that. And from what I understand, by the time they got to the bottom of the hole, they're at 1,068 meters. And that was it. That was Cascabel, right? So, but that's how I think the modern approach to these porphyries is: don't drill across them and away from them, chase them. Like if you've got it, tag onto it and follow it, like hunt it, like just hunt it, and take the academics to a certain degree out. I don't care about true thickness. I care about where that's coming from. So the best way to find out where it's coming from is to chase it. Like identify it at surface, follow it, and figure out where it came from. Just follow it straight up.
Okay, very good. So let's talk about this drill program. So 2,500 meters of diamond drilling. I'm assuming, because this is a porphyry target, that's going to be 4 to 5 holes. Is that right?
It'd be 4 to 5 holes, exactly. Probably 500-meter holes. That's what I've got booked. Should we be in mineralization at 500 meters? I'm not stopping. Drill here can go to about 1,250, the one we've got on site. So good enough for me right now. If we need to go deeper than 1,250, well, then I need to bring in a whole nother situation next. If we're still at drilling mineralization, we're in good shape, and I'll bring in a couple big rigs that are capable of taking care of that, and we'll deal with that next year. But first step, let's just get the 1,200. Let's get past 500, and we'll take it in a step. Not get ahead of ourselves here, but yeah, 500-meter holes. I think that's the minimum you should be doing on porphyry exploration in British Columbia, because of the nature of our porphyries that we have in this particular area, which tend to be more pencil porphyries, they call them. They're not these giant sort of Arizona, Chilean porphyries, or even a Highland Valley type thing. We're probably looking for something here. I suspect that's more similar to something like the new Afton mine in Kamloops, where you've got a higher, that's what I'm hoping anyway, is you've got a higher grade type of system that allows you to have a much smaller footprint, and they're very advantageous for mining companies because they tend to make a lot of money on these things. So that's the idea. Like I heard from David Strang years ago from Lumina Copper, there, Ross Beatty's right-hand man, that the only thing apparently harder than finding a mine is selling it. And that's how our shareholders make money, if I can sell this. So you mentioned advantageous location. We are in an advantageous location. We're not far from power, infrastructure, roads, rail, all of that stuff. I mean, I can be at a Save On Foods in 2.5 hours. You know, or I can be at a Costco in Prince George in 3.5 hours, and just being close to resources in Fort St. James and Vanderhoof and Prince George is a big deal, especially if for the guys that build mines, and for me. But most importantly, if I want to sell it to a major, that's critical.
Okay, so you said you're starting south of the creek in hole 1 and then moving north. So tell us a little bit about the order of the holes and why they're going to be in that order.
The order of the holes is pretty simple, really. The first hole is to chase the dike, quite simply. We'll get a tremendous amount of information out of that hole as well. How many phases of porphyry are there? What's the nature of the interaction between the porphyry and the veins? My senior advisor, Paul Johnson, who was Tech's senior porphyry guy for years, we often talk about a couple things that I found very interesting in that. One of them is the chicken and the egg with the porphyry, because you've got something breaks through the rocks. It's either the porphyry or the veins. Either one can come first, but something is the initial breakthrough. And it looks like in our case, quite possibly it was the veins, then the porphyry, then another veins set. And you can just tell by looking at it, right? And but just getting that information is going to be critical to us as we move forward. How many phases of porphyry are there? What's the relationship between the sulfide, quartz sulfide veins we're seeing, giving us an idea what to better target. And we'll take that information and move north. Now, we're not going to just jump way to the north. I'm probably moving a few hundred meters to the north to start, and then another few hundred meters as well. But the idea is to quite simply start from a known, as opposed to jumping out in the middle of, you know, unknown territory. Work from a known and build and build and build on it in a efficient manner that gets us as quickly as possible to the answers we need within 5 holes.
Okay. And now let's talk about share structure and financing. So I see you closed a $1.5 million financing.
Right.
Oh, actually, just now you closed it.
Second
so
tranche
that,
morning.
Yeah. Does that fully fund you for this phase of drilling?
That does, absolutely. Yeah, we're fully funded here now. So that'll take care of everything, including the few extra things we got to spend money on the winter, a little extra fuel, you know, that type of thing. But that'll certainly cover that. This is not an expensive area to drill. We're not up in the Golden Triangle. We're not up in the Tootagon. No helicopters are necessary here. They'd be a luxury if we had them, but we don't need them here. Plenty of road, and we can build a road as well relatively easily. So we're fully funded, and that's a nice position to be in.
And then shares outstanding, is that right? 152
No,
million?
we're probably, after the recent financing, just over 200 now. So we're up around 200 million shares out now.
Okay. And who are some of the largest shareholders?
Our big shareholders would be, well, certainly Haywood, and that would be David Elliott and Andrew Williams and their group of clients within Haywood. They've been with us since day one. They're probably our biggest shareholder for sure. Probably with all their clients combined and everything, probably around 40%, and they've maintained their position. They were the first ones to, well, Rick Rule and David Elliott were the first two to write us checks back in 2012 and 13 when we started this company at this land position. This is what got everybody excited, and I really have to thank David Elliott and Andrew Williams there at Haywood, who've been with us and stayed with us, haven't sold a ton of shares, and they've supported us you know, through thick and thin, right? And they supported us through our prospect generator days, and they've been great shareholders. We have another syndicate in Vancouver, a local syndicate. They probably hold now 35% as well. Existing shareholders have been with us for a long time. About 3 years ago, we did a bit of a share cleanup, and a number of individuals from that syndicate did step in and purchase a fair number of shares at sitting around between 1 and 2 cents. So we did a fair bit of cleanup there. And so I think now we're in a pretty good position here. But for the most part, it's Haywood and the Vancouver syndicate. They're probably in the range of 70% at least of shares outstanding.
Okay. And then how many shares do you own, and how did you acquire them?
All my shares I purchased. I think initially I had shares when the founder's shares were at 5 cents. And then I purchased them all the way up to jeepers creepers, I think up to 20 cents and as low as 2 cents. So I'm sitting around 5 million shares, and plus some options, and I would like to have bought more shares. I'd love to have more, but you know, we've been pretty thrifty with the company and kept, you know, we had a couple lean years here very recently, and after acquiring the Trident in 2022, we had massive
2023 was an awful year.
It was an awful year for us. We had well, actually, our Pinnacle property and Trident both, well, Pinnacle burnt to the ground, and Trident, 50% of it burned. We couldn't even get to the property, and our partner, who we had at the time on Pinnacle, they had to cancel the drill program, and that scuttled their company, not being able to get to the property, and it burned for an entire year before it went out. And then in 2024, I was actually heading up here to get going, and got a call that I had been diagnosed with cancer, so I had to deal with that for a while. And
oh man!
But I was still able to send a couple people up here to keep things moving and get things going. And that was 2024 was the year we had our permit kind of kicked back to us, so that had to be rejigged to accommodate for just the nature of crossing and putting in culverts, actual culverts. Although they're non-fish bearing creeks, this isn't 1986 anymore. And you just can't roll through with excavators and, you know, in a case of dynamite and make things happen. Those days are long behind us. So made sure in 2024 that the permit that was resubmitted was very robust, and we're in good shape now. So no, it's because of shareholders like Haywood and David Elliott and their patience. They, I think they recognize that the effort it took to get this land position, the persistence, and the reason I focused on it. And you know, without great shareholders like that, it would have been probably impossible. So it's such a team effort between shareholders, geologists, drillers, your back end in terms of your accounting, your corporate secretary. I mean, it really is such a team effort, especially when the times are tough in this business, and they were for a few years for us and for the market. I've been up and down and seen these things come and go, but one thing I think I've learned is that if you really want to have success for your shareholders in this business, you need to be there at the bottom, getting, you know, as hard as it is and as ugly as it is, and you know, not getting paid, all that sort of stuff, right? If you believe, you got to be there when the market's just terrible, because when it turns in this market, it turns so fast. It turns so fast.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Not positioned. If you're not positioned, it's like being in a 100-meter dash. If you're not positioned, you got to give those guys a 50-meter head start, and the race is it's over before you even gotten off the blocks. So yeah, so that's how I looked at it. That's how I approached it.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that you acquired the project on very good terms in 2022. That was a very barren year. We had that 1 or 2 months in early 2022 where the sector rose and then everything crashed, and it was a very, very bad year. Brad, final question. Look, it's a small market cap.
Yep.
It's a very cheap stock, and obviously the market's going to be waiting for any news from the drill program with bated breath. How do you anticipate to report and yeah, just keep shareholders updated as the drill program evolves.
It's actually pretty straightforward. How I'm approaching it anyway is we use a lab in North Vancouver, ALS Labs, and what works best for them is to get sample batches in batches of 200, right? So we're sampling at 1.5 meter intervals for the most part. So what that means, translation for the investing public, is that we're doing batches of 300 meters of drill core at a time. So as soon as we're at 300 meters and that core is cut, I'm not going to be asking people for super detailed logs here. I'm pretty straightforward. It's either dog rock or it's not, right? It's almost that simple. So do your logging, cut the core. Let's get this to the lab fast as possible. I'll be basically sending in, making sure as soon as that first 300 meters is done, that's a 200 sample lot to the lab. That's perfect. That's what they want. That'll go the first 300 meters. And then as soon as we get to, say 500 meters or even 600, the next lot will go. So it'll be in 300 meter intervals. That's what I'll be sending to the lab. That's the most efficient way to do it for us, for them, and I think for shareholders. That's how I'll be approaching it. Sample turnaround time. One of the beauties is where there's not a giant lineup right now at the labs. There are not a lot of people starting drilling programs right now, so we're in a good spot there. I won't be putting a rush on the samples because that doubles your cost, which is it starts to get a little wild. But I'd estimate somewhere around a month, 3 weeks to a month, something like that is probably a realistic kind of turnaround. Is as long as we provide them with, you know, batch numbers that work for them, that are efficient for them, which is 200. And making sure that all our paperwork and everything's correct, then I expect that we should have a pretty efficient turnaround for shareholders. And so if we're looking at starting here today and first hole a week, should be starting to see results mid to late November.
Okay. Brad Peters, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you, Robert.
Will stay tuned to see how the drill program evolves. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Robert. Appreciate it.